Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Rainmaker Stories. I have with me Madhura DasGupta, founder and CEO of Aspire for Her, an organization working towards furthering diversity and inclusion in the corporate world. Welcome, Madhura.
Thank you so much, Nishtha. Pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you. So we'll straightly dive into the Q&A for the day. So Madhura has been a banker for close to 25 years before starting Aspire for Her. And I know that career pivots today are no longer a taboo that they used to be. There are many youngsters and many professionals who are making career pivots at different stages of their life. So, Madhura, what would be your advice to people considering a career pivot? What made you take that call? Because banking and Aspire for Her are two very different industries. So, what made you take that call after 25 years as a banker? And did you face any challenges in making this choice? And how did you tackle those?
Thank you. That's a great question, Nishtha. And I think the most important why, in my life really led to my career pivot. And, as 25 years as a banker, I was looking at gender data emanating from India. And when I realized that in terms of economic participation, our country ranks sixth from a list of 156 countries, sixth from the bottom in a list of 156 countries. I was a little shocked and surprised because the Indian women that I saw around me were among the best and the brightest in the world. When I looked a little deeper into the data, I realized that the workforce participation of women has been declining for the past 15 years. I felt someone needed to do something about this problem, and I felt that someone could be me. That is how Aspire for Her was born. Yes, it was a challenge to do this after 25 years in the professional world. I was used to a life which was very different, having large teams, having a lot of resources at my disposal. So starting off as a startup wasn't always probably the ideal thing to do. But I was turning 50 years old, and I thought that I needed to do something to change the world. And that's the reason why I took the call, Nishtha.
Wow, that's very inspiring, Madhura. Like if you could, it's like you broke the age barrier also somewhere, because that's also a very common stereotype that is out there. Like when Falguni listed Naika, people were focused on wow, she broke age stereotypes, she broke gender stereotypes. And I think with your career pivot, you prove that too. That age is also not a barrier to make those pivot or to make those changes.
Absolutely not. And sometimes it can just be the conscience keeper in your diary to say that you have to start doing something which you really feel passionately about.
Yeah, that's true actually. So I'll move on to the next question. Madhura, you come across as someone who's very confident, who's comfortable taking risks, puts across her views very confidently. But I would say there are many professionals and more so many women out there who struggle with this. They struggle with being assertive. They face imposter syndrome more commonly as compared to men. I'll quote a little study here also. Like there was a KPMG study which found out that women, only 22% women feel that they're taught the value of self confidence as children. The most commonly taught values to them are hard work and respect. And this somewhere reflects on their professional journeys as well, because they're more submissive in their choices. They question themselves that okay, am I up for this next big thing or not? So it impacts your career journey, your choices all across. So what would be your advice to professionals at large and to women in particular? How can they break out of this childhood conditioning, and how can they solve for this problem of imposter syndrome?
Again, great question, Nishtha. This is exactly what we're trying to break. This cycle is exactly what we're trying to break at Aspire for Her. One of the many things that we wish to achieve. So we're looking at motivating women to enter and stay in the workforce and make it a success. We're looking at adding 1 million women to the workforce by 2025. And we're trying to do that by using the power of communities and networks. So all of these issues that you mentioned, of lack of confidence and of lack of, skills to really, sort of move forward in their professional career, Uh, we work with communities, we build communities, and we also try to ensure that women know that they are not alone in their problems. We've seen magical stuff happen out of there through the power of communities, because people realize that they're not alone, and they connect with each other, they elevate each other, they motivate each other, and therefore find solutions to problems creatively and collectively.
I think that's
Uh,
very important. Yeah. The
yeah,
power of network and community that you're bringing forth to solve such a common issue which is faced by all. But often,
absolutely.
people don't, raise their hands and say, I am facing it. So that's actually great, solving it with the power of community.
Absolutely. And you'll be surprised to see in some of our communities how people, uh, just sort of take inspiration and motivation from each other to make their point, or to ensure that they negotiate for that raise, they negotiate for that role. They move forward and sort of take a stand against a social construct that is prohibiting them from doing something. We see a lot of that every day.
That's commendable, Madhura. So that leads me to the next question that I had in my mind. So you've been a banker, and BFSI as an industry is also, where the gender issues tend to be skewed, especially when you climb up the ladder. And in general, in India, like the data shows that less than 3% CEOs are women in India, for instance, or as many as close to 40% enter the workforce, but hardly 11% reach those senior levels. So that attrition is really high through this funnel. And then you turn to be an entrepreneur. There again, there are like so many challenges which I've interacted with many women founders, and they've highlighted, wherein, for instance, during a fundraise, if they're expecting, they're often told, come back after your delivery, what will happen to the company during your maternity period. Or if you are a women-led company, you may be questioned on, will you be able to hire men? Will you face challenge in bringing talent on? So have you observed any of these biases, conscious or unconscious? Like, have you experienced them firsthand, or have you observed them around you? And how did you tackle those?
So again, these unconscious biases are the constructs against which we fight every day. It's not only among men, but it exists equally among women as well. I'll talk more about the biases that we observed, the biases that emanated through our various conversations as we were launching Aspire for Her. And we have tried to create a framework that actually fights these biases. And we realized that the main root cause behind all of these biases was actually the mindset, or rather the non-changing mindset that we see all around us. So we look at a solution, being part of a solution rather than being part of the problem. And therefore, we came up with our own 5-point mindset change model. The first pillar in that model is mentors and role models. So, when you talk biases, uh, we have to look at the paths that have been trodden before us and what sort of biases have they faced in the professional world. So we have about 150 women leaders who are CEOs, CXOs, unicorn builders, and women who are leading their own organizations in many different ways. They are mentors on Aspire for Her, and they try and ensure that our members can successfully combat these biases, recognize them, and combat them in their own professional journeys. The second pillar that we work on is learning. And here we look at upskilling and reskilling options with world-class organizations, because learning, data, having that strong point of view always helps us fight biases.
Wow.
The third pillar that we work on is career previews. And we celebrate women in their careers. And you'll not see this often in mainstream media, but this helps us sort of re-emphasize the saying, if she can see it, she can be it. And we also find that to be a very proactive and a wonderful way to bust biases and myths. The fourth pillar we work on is really the peer community, where the community becomes the source of strength, And community also becomes a sort of a go-to place, a safe space where the other members help you face those biases and ensure that you don't fall prey to them. And of course, the last pillar that we work on is where we want all women in India to be. And one of the three E's: employment, entrepreneurship, or education, which leads to one of these two. So these are what opens the doors and windows of minds of our members to ensure that they are ready, they have the resources, they have the strength to fight all the biases that they encounter in their journey.
Wow, Madhura. And I think the highlight of all the five pillars that just is going to be in my mind is if she sees it, she can be it.
Absolutely.
That's such a powerful thought that you put out there. In fact, that was one of the motivations for me also to write Awakening the Rainmaker. I started my career as an investment banker, and I had very limited role models around me. And you'll be familiar with this term. We use the term rainmaker for people in very senior positions in the banking industry who are enjoying a lot of power. They bring in a lot of revenue, and there were just not many women rainmakers around me.
Sure.
And that's when this thought of writing the book came. That's why this thought of interviewing the phenomenal women I have interviewed in the book came along, because I wanted to present role models from different fields to young
Right.
girls and young professionals out there, so that they know that even they can do it. And there are now research which shows, Madhura, that close to 70% of women can pursue a path of their calling if they have a relatable role model. So
Absolutely, absolutely. And 4 out of 5 girls in India have no successful, relatable, professional role models in their lives,
right.
which is the void that we're trying to fill to the best of our ability. Long way to go for us.
But that's tremendous work that you're doing in this field. Just the power of community, networking, mentorship. I think that's very important. That's a major gap that you're filling in there.
Thank you, Nishtha.
So Madhura, what is your vision for Aspire for her, and where do you see it creating the most impact?
Well, we want to see every young woman in India to be financially independent. Rather, every woman in India to be financially independent. And, we want to look at that big audacious goal of 1 million by 2025, because in India, you can't really talk numbers smaller than this to create a true impact. We want to buck the trend of the declining trajectory of women in the workforce, and we want to ensure that we create a more friendly, equitable, a better society where everyone has a chance to meet their professional success.
That's brilliant. That's a very noble thought. And I'm totally rooting for you that you achieve that number by 2025. In fact, ahead of it.
Thank you. Thank you. And we also have another number, and we want to reach 10 million women, impact 10 million women by 2030.
Wow, that's commendable, actually, to do those numbers and the kind of impact that that can create. And this is not just the social impact, but the economic impact this can have on the country. Now, there are studies which show that if you increase your women participation in the workforce by just 10 percentage points, we can add $770 billion to our GDP. And that's huge money. That's a potential we're really missing out on currently by not employing women in the workforce.
Absolutely. That's the McKinsey study that I think you're talking about, and that's been an inspiration behind all our work. So we actually look at the $1 trillion opportunity that India can potentially unleash if we have just a little more than 10% increase in the workforce participation of women. In fact, our group of mentors that we have is called Trillion, so that we constantly remind ourselves of that, Nishtha.
That's great, Madhura. So I'll close the interview with this one key question. What would be your advice to young women entering the workforce?
Just one thing: never ever give up, and ensure that you always aspire for her.
Wow, that's actually a very powerful thought. Thank you so much, Madhura. Your journey is clearly an inspiration in terms of career pivots, age not being a barrier, and just trying to do something which is not only socially relevant, but can bring about a huge economic change in the country too. So all the best in your endeavors, and thank you so much for taking out the time for our listeners.
Thank you for having me, Nishtha. Thank you.